My first uploader tonight, Southend poet David Pearman, who's back again after having sent us a few things over the last few months. So, David, it's lovely to have you back. It's good to see you again. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great, and I'm glad you said back again. It has a kind of a nice ring to it.
Yeah,
So,
then it does. Well, listen, I don't want to get too forward, but it'd be lovely to book you again to come back on and share some more work. Should you feel, the need to do so? But it is lovely when people come back, David. You know, we've been doing it for three and a bit years now, and. I know not everyone always feels like they don't want to send it to Rob. He's on the BBC. Listen, they let me on here. Like, lower it a little bit. I know we are still BBC Essex and whatnot, but I'm a nice guy. I'm not I'm not a judge of anything. And actually, I really hope that people who do it just as a hobby, if it's just something you do for your own entertainment, your own sort of pleasure, that you'll feel comfortable to send it this way and we can share it, because I think sometimes you hear someone else's work, or you kind of hear someone talking about their work, and it inspires you to do something yourself. Maybe you start a bit of painting for whatever reason. Was there a person or someone either in poetry or just someone in your life that sort of inspired you to start doing your own?
no, there wasn't a person really. I think I've always been more interested in sort of things rather than people.
Yeah.
So the thing that really inspired me was just, I suppose, listening to music. That was my first love. Listening to the lyrics of songs that I liked, and wanting to sort of emulate that. And so I started writing my own terrible lyrics at the age of 18, 19. And
We all
I would
did it,
basically,
David. We all did it.
yeah, I would take the melodies of songs that I liked, and I would write my own lyrics to them. And yeah,
Okay.
they weren't very good, but that's how I kind of got started,
So actually, you
basically.
used almost the rhythm, the meter to song melodies that you liked, and thought, well, actually, if I can write some words that I want to write that fit that rhythm, fit that kind of that pattern, that would give you a good starting point.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a great way to get started because you've already got the structure, you've already got the sort of the rhythm of the syllables, and it is a great way to get started. It's
Mm.
quite a daunting task to be faced with a blank page and not know how to start it, or what the rhythm's going to be like, or what the structure's going to be like. So, that is a good tip actually. Just take the melody of your favorite song and just write lyrics to that, or
I
poems.
can't believe how weird this is, because I've recently refound an old song which I love. I've loved for a very, very long time, but it's one of those songs you hear a lot, and then suddenly you just stop listening to it one day, and then you sort of don't hear it again for ages, and then it crops back up again. Like, oh yeah, I love this song, and then you do the whole thing of playing it to death type thing. And I have been listening to it in the last week. I'm not going to tell you what it is for a minute. I've been listening to it a lot in the last couple of weeks, and I feel like there's another verse that needs writing. It just needs one more verse. They're not particularly long verses, and I've been in my head. I've just been sort of listening to it and going, trying to work out what words that needs to go in this extra verse. So it's interesting that you say that you borrowed the rhythm and that sort of that pattern to give you at least something to work from, because sometimes it's hard when you have no parameters. There's sort of nothing, there's no limits. It's almost impossible to start. When sometimes if someone said, right, David, you've got to write me a piece that has no more than 8 words a line, and it has to have colour in there. And the theme is colour, and that would probably be more useful than me saying, David, write me a poem, anything you like, because suddenly you've narrowed your field of focus to something.
Yeah, I mean, quite often I do feel inspired, and I just write and write and write, and that's why freeform is so useful, because it doesn't adhere to a structure. You can just write whatever you want and not have to worry about rhymes and stuff like that. But if you are stuck for ideas, then that gives you a jumping off point for sure.
Well, we do have a theme for April, so should you be, stuck with a little kink in your think, and you're like, it just needs something to go with, almost to follow what you've just said, David, our theme this month is music. maybe use, rather than writing about music, perhaps maybe use a rhythm from a song you really like, or a really famous and popular rhythm, and rewrite some words. Do it in your own way. David, one thing I wanted to ask about, and especially about this piece we're going to share tonight, Metamorphs, it got me thinking about your language, the words you use. And I wondered if you thought that your writing and your performance has impacted your everyday language.
Well, I mean, I suppose, it's one thing to learn a word, it's another to be able to use it. So, yeah, I'd say that it does give you an excuse to exercise your vocabulary. And, whether I use it freely in everyday speech, I have no idea. It's much easier to kind of sit down and think about what you want to say, because, I'm one of these people, I edit to death,
Yeah.
like I'll have like a line, and then maybe I'll change every word. It's still the same meaning, but maybe the rhythm was off, or one of the words I didn't like, or something like that. So it's much easier to kind of sit there and think about what you want to write. But I do find myself in everyday conversations where I'm looking for a word, or I wish it would roll off the tongue. I wish things would just come to me. And sometimes they don't. And I think about it in hindsight, think, oh, I wish I'd said this. I wish I'd said that. But, maybe I hope I'll get better at it as time goes on. But
David, it happens to me live on the radio on a regular basis, so please don't fret about it. I sit here and go, "What's the word for the thing with the when you put the oh anyway, I'll come back to it." And it's always happening, and sometimes maybe this is being having one of those creative brains, is that sometimes it works too fast for your own good, and you're not quite sure how to keep up with it, or maybe you're out of sync with yourself in a sense as well. But it's funny that you say how much, like, sometimes you edit and edit and edit and edit and edit. And if I may, I'll change that word to the word change, because the poem you've sent us, you said when you uploaded it, you said there's a poem you wrote about change, the harsh reality of it, the painful means by which some things change. Yet change is not always a bad thing, or is it?
No, I think there's always a contrast and a dichotomy to it. I think there are positive changes and negative, but I think we fear change because, we become so secure in our lives that any kind of change brings the unknown, and we always fear the unknown. And I suppose, we as a species always strive to change. We're always trying to lose weight, or we're trying to become smarter, or I
Yeah.
don't know, we're trying to I don't know, get a job that we want, or something like that. We're always striving to change, and sometimes that process can be quite traumatic in a way, which can be a good thing, I suppose. I think what I say in the poem is that pain is necessary for change. Sometimes, sometimes it has to hurt
Yeah.
for you to be able to go through these kinds of these changes. And the way I thought about it, actually, when I was writing this poem, I was thinking of American Werewolf in London.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
remember the
yeah.
transformation scene where he transforms into the werewolf, and he's like screaming out, but his arms like changing, and
Yeah.
that's the kind of visceral image I wanted to kind of convey with this poem, I suppose.
Which, again, I mean, so it's almost like we'd planned this entire conversation, because, David, the thing I wanted to ask was about the word metamorphs, which is the name of the piece you've sent us. I'll be honest with you, I thought I could have described, or at least given a good definition of it, but I also thought I'd check the dictionary. The dictionary states that it is an insect or amphibian with the process of transformation from an immature form to an adult form in two or more distinct stages.
Mhm.
And I guess change, metamorphosis, evolution, growth, it's sort of all, there's a bit of a mishmash of all of those things. And the fact that Werewolf of London was, the sort of the image for you in your mind when writing it, sort of hits home that same thought with the whole piece. So Before we hear it, David, remind us: is there anywhere where we can find your work? Are you putting it anywhere else, or is it a nice exclusive for BBC Upload?
Well, I've performed it once, so there are a couple of places I perform which I want to give a shout out to. So there's
Please do.
the Lee Community Centre, which they do a poetry event on the second Wednesday of every month from 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. And then there's Mawson's Micropub in South Church. They do a poetry event on every second Sunday from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. So those are the places where I tend to kind of frequent in terms of like uploading it to the internet. I haven't really gotten around to that stage yet, but I'm happy when I'm performing. So that's kind of my medium at the moment.
There's still something quite nice about that, though, David. That there's lots of people who share their stuff online. I've found myself in a lot of TikTok holes and YouTube holes of recent watching poets perform their stuff to camera. But there's something about being in the room with the person, and so you mentioned second Sunday. I think this weekend is the second Sunday, but obviously being Easter, does that change things for the South Church venue?
Yeah. So basically, it got moved to the first Sunday, so we already did it on Sunday
last week.
But there's still the Lee Community Centre coming up next Wednesday. So.
Thank you once again for trusting us with your poetry and of course for joining us to chat about it on the show as well, David. So I really appreciate that. Before you go though, will you do us the honours of introducing your poem, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rob, for having me on again. My name's David Pearman, and this is my poem, Metamorphs.
Does it know its own destiny, rapidly chewing its way through the holly? Their lances are for the birds, their red bulbous berries are forbidden. But it was not built to crave the juice of sweeter things just yet. Its pinhead brothers and sisters spared the anguish beyond the hatching. They are given the luxury of a successful, unspectacular death before a hanging is given to Chrysos or Greek gold. Because this beguiling process is only fair in parallax. It speaks of alchemy, the cool milk of gossamer. But naively we overlook the clandestine disintegration, the auctioning off of spare parts, the harsh pulsating toil before the famed second birth, all commissioned by Mother Earth under the guise of pure industry. It endures roughly 3 to 5 weeks of this, a long weekend in Messiah days, hidden inside of its claustrophobic ark, or imprisoned in its tomb of agony, and carried through this sort of twisted hibernation of which we can only pretend to understand. The writhing that forges the kind of beauty of the toiling rose, and yet emerging to feel the open air for the first time in weeks, not tired or haggard, but ready. Because the part of it that strived to change, the part that sweated and strained and then died, has changed as well. If you could see me now, you'd see a man cocooned, waiting to emerge as something greater, knowing now that he must dissolve himself entirely, piece by piece, cell by cell, thought by thought, solely by choice, not by nature. No guarantees that are the lone prerogative of smaller non-thinking things who are doomed to that inevitable path. And I was dumb to it, like they are dumb to it. The notion that if it does not hurt, then nothing has changed. I'm talking about rain in a cold spring. I can't feel it yet, but I am waiting.
Our first uploader tonight, South End poet David Pearman, with his poem Metamorphs on BBC Essex.